April 16th, 1946. Place the interrogation room. Seated at the table are two men, Otto Moll, whose legs and arms are shackled, and interrogator, Lieutenant Colonel Smith W. Burkhart, who is wearing a military uniform. You're the same Otto Moll who appeared here this morning, and you understand that your statements are made under oath?
Yes. May I make a request, please?
Yes.
In Landsberg, I made the request that I be confronted by Rudolf Haas, the commandant of the Auschwitz camp, so that I may testify in front of Host and Host may testify in front of me. I request you now that this may be granted. I would like to have Host testify in my presence, as I would like to see the statements that he made in my presence, and I can testify as to the truth.
Assuming that you are confronted by Host, are you going to tell the truth, or are you going to give us the same kind of story you gave us this morning?
No. I want Host to come here and just state what orders he gave me, and I can say yes or no as to what is true and what is not true. Host should come here and say what orders he gave me, what duties I fulfilled, and in what manner I accomplished them, and then I can deny or confirm what he says.
We will conduct this interrogation on the manner we wish, and on the basis of the subjects in which we are interested. You are to listen carefully. You are not to interrupt or make any sound whatsoever until you are requested. Do you understand this?
I will be silent and I will listen to him.
You will be given the opportunity to speak at the proper time.
Please approve this request that Host may come here and repeat his incriminating testimony against me. It hurts me to see that he, the commandant, is running around free while I go around shackled to a guard.
We are not interested whatsoever in your feelings in this matter. Rudolf Host, commandant of the Auschwitz camp, enters the room. Are you the same Rudolf Host who has appeared here on numerous times and given testimony?
I am.
Do you understand the statements you make here this afternoon are made under oath?
Yes.
Do you know this person sitting to your right that is shackled to the guard?
Yes.
What is his name?
Otto Moll.
Where did you know him?
First at Sachsenhausen and later at Auschwitz.
What did this Otto Moll do at Sachsenhausen and later at Auschwitz?
In Sachsenhausen, he was a gardener. Later at Auschwitz, he was used as a leader of a work detail. And later on, he was used as supervisor during the various actions.
You mean the actions whereby people were executed and later cremated? You told us this morning about his first assignments in 1941 when farm buildings were converted into an extermination plant. Can you restate what you said about that?
Yes, at first he worked on the farm, and later I moved him into the farmhouse, which was used as a professional extermination plant.
Otto Moll, is what the witness just said true?
First, I was used in work in connection with the excavation of the mass graves. Host must know that. He is in error if he says that I worked in the buildings where the grassing was carried out. At first, I was used for the excavation where the grassing was carried out. At first. Host, you must remember that. You remember Swanson, Blank, Ullman, Hartford, and Garden. Those are the people who worked in the building at the time when you alleged that I worked there and that I worked on these excavations. Surely Host remembers that.
Is that right?
Moll is correct insofar as to say he was first used in the excavations, but that was before he was being used for the execution.
What is being said here, as I told you this morning, is that you are responsible for this operation, namely for the killing and destruction of the bodies in the first improvised slaughterhouse.
I was responsible to see that the corpses were burned after the people were killed. I was never responsible for the actual supervision of the killing. It was always the officers or the physicians who were present at the time. As my commandant at the time, Host should be able to confirm this.
What do you say about this?
As I said this morning, he is only partly correct. As I explained, the gas was actually thrown into the chamber by the medical personnel, and Moll was not responsible for supervising the entire process, beginning with the arrival of the transport and the burning of the corpses, okay? He was only responsible for a part of this process, at least initially.
You did say that he was responsible for seeing these people were exterminated.
I could have been misunderstood. What I said, or meant to say, was that Maul was responsible in the buildings where he worked. At first to see that the people were undressed in an orderly fashion, and after they were killed to see that the bodies were disposed of in an orderly fashion. Later on, when the extensive extermination plant was completed, he was responsible for the entire operation.
Just what operations in the plant was he responsible for?
He was responsible for everything, up to and including the actual leading into the gas chambers of the people, and after that, to remove the bodies to burn them.
Will you please repeat about Mole shooting people through the neck?
Yes. As I explained this morning, those that were too weak to be moved to the gas chamber, or who could not be moved for some other reason, were shot through the neck by Maul, or some of the other fellows around with small caliber arms.
Well, what do you say about that?
It may be possible that some of them were shot by me, but it was a comparatively small number, and I would like to know if Hulse ever saw me do it.
I told you this morning that Hulse said he saw you do it, and so did many others. Hulse, isn't that right?
Yes, it is true. I mentioned this morning that there were comparatively few killed in this manner.
You could not tell if it was a few dozen or a few hundred. That was your problem.
I cannot give you an exact number. That is impossible for so many years. There were many. Sometimes there were a few out of each incoming transport, and sometimes there were none. That is why I cannot tell you the exact number.
Well, this is the first thing you have admitted. Now you are telling the truth about which you lied this morning. Are you ready to tell us the truth regarding your responsibility about other operations?
Yes, and I will tell you the truth as long as my commandant is present. Let my commandant tell you what I did and what my duties were.
We know what Hulse said. What we want to know is your story. You asked us for the opportunity to tell your story, and that is what caused us to bring Hulse in.
No, I asked to be interrogated in the presence of Hulse.
You told us this morning that Mole was considered the best man for exterminations because he handled the teams of prisoners and guards better than your other subordinates. Is that right?
That is right.
Mole, suppose you tell us what was your method of selection of foremen from the capos, and just what you found to be the best method of handling the guards that had charge of the transports after they came in.
When I was ordered to do this work, the work details had already been selected. My Uberfers had already selected the capos or foremen, whatever you call them. I carried out correctly the work in all kinds of weather. I was never drunk on duty or when I was with the prisoners. And I never mistreated any of the prisoners. I achieved good success in the work of the prisoners because I, myself, achieved good success in their own hands. The prisoners had respect for me. I had always behaved as an exemplary soldier towards them. Therefore, I was designated for any kind of difficult work that came up. May I ask Hulse to confirm this?
Is that right?
Yes, that is what I stated this morning.
You were decorated for your work, were you not?
Yes, I was. I received the decoration for my services. Almost all who served for a number of years in the whole of Germany received these decorations. I would not receive any decoration for special work like this work. I would not have wanted to receive a decoration for this kind of work.
Why?
Because I did not look upon this work as honorable work.
Did you ever protest?
Yes, I asked many times why those things had to be done. Why could it have not been stopped? I even asked Hulse, and Hulse himself did not like this, but he himself had strict orders, and nothing could be done about it. He, like the rest of us, suffered by this work, and none of us were really sane anymore.
Is that right, Hulse?
Yes, others also said that and already testified to that fact in the Reich.
When do you think you lost your sanity, Hulse?
I think you mean that just when our nerves started to crack. Now, I can testify that I was not healthy in 1942. I told you about my leave in 1943, however, I had to do those things as there was no one else in Auschwitz that could do it for me. There were strict orders that had to be followed. Many of the others felt as I did, and the subordinate leaders came to me in the same manner as Maul did and discussed it. They had the same feeling.
Do you think that Mole was crazy?
No.
How long do you think you've been without your sanity?
I did not mean to say that I was insane, or that I have been insane. What I meant is that my nerves have cracked, and have cracked repeatedly. They were bad after the accident I described in 1937. Later, They were very bad after I had an attack of typhus. I was in hospital, and I was granted a leave of absence by the doctors for the conditions of my nerves. I was never declared unfit for duty on account of bad nerve or because of the so-called paragraph 51.
How many people do you estimate went through the operation which you were responsible for? How many victims?
When you use these words, you were responsible. I want to emphasize again that I do not wish to have that word applied in any way to the actual killing of the people. I was not responsible for the actual physical ending of their lives, and I will not admit that as it is not the fact.
You did not pull the trigger, but you caused someone else to do it. Is that your position?
I do not understand the question.
How many victims were exterminated in the camp from 1941 on?
I don't know the number, and I don't think I would be able to give you a number as far as the total number of victims goes. I believe Haas might know that.
The only thing we are interested in is what you have knowledge of.
When I was in charge of these excavations, as I told you about before, together with another comrade, which was confirmed by Haas today, we put between 30,000 and 40,000 people in these mass graves. It was the most terrible thing that could be carried out by any human being.
Stick to the figures.
I don't know these people or who they were or how they got there. I excavated the mass graves. I was responsible for burning the bodies right there.
How does this figure strike you, Hoss?
It is impossible for him to know the exact figures, but they appear to be much too small as far as I can remember today. The people buried in the two big mass graves of the so-called dugouts 1 and 2 amounted to about 106,000 or 107,000.
I could not complete the excavation detail, which I mentioned before. Then I got the attack of typhus.
What do you estimate was the number of bodies you handled?
It was later they went through the crematory plant, and I would say between 40,000 and 50,000. That is, at the crematory where I was responsible. I was not responsible for the two large crematories, as they were two SS Corps members, Nosfield and also Foss, who were responsible for the two large cremations, and Hoss will remember that.
Tell us about the figures you know.
I told you the number. Maybe 50,000, possibly there were more.
Is that for all times from 1941 clear to the end?
Yes, that is from 1941 for the entire length of my service, when I had anything to do with the matter.
Don't you think you are much too modest? You had the reputation of being the biggest killer in Auschwitz. The figures there run into the millions. Won't you change your statement?
That is not true. I was not the greatest killer in Auschwitz.
You were the greatest cremator.
That is not true either. The number is not right, and is probably brought up by the men who want me to be punished by death.
Also, what do you think would be the correct figure?
Maul, in my opinion, cannot possibly have any idea of the number of killings in the dugouts where he was working and responsible. Now, at any rate, they were far, far too low, Maul's figures. Simply far too low.
What figure would you attribute to Maul's responsibility?
It is impossible for me to quote the exact, or even a very rough figure of the number of corpses that were handled by him. Now, as the use of the extermination plan varied at all times, I don't know how many corpses I would have to attribute to Maul, how many Nussfeld, to the others. How many? I don't know.
Maul, how many women and children do you estimate were among the bodies you handled?
Men and women, there were about equal numbers, and the ratio of children to other people was about 1 child and 100 people brought in. Sometimes transports arrived without children. I would also like to say that I was not constantly working with these transports, and of course, I cannot tell you what happened during my absence when I was not there. I was away on leave of absence, etc.
We've heard that there were more children than that. Do you want to change your statement?
As I told you, it may be 1 child in 100, or it may be more. I cannot remember the number exactly.
What do you say to that, Hoss?
My estimate is that 1/3 of all the victims would be men, and 2/3 women and children. Okay? Now, I'm not able to quote the exact ratio between the women and children, as that it varied greatly with the transports that came in. However, I do remember that in the transports that came in from Ukraine and Hungary, the proportion of children was particularly high.
And what year was that?
That was in 1943, perhaps it may have been the earlier 1944.
Maul, yesterday you said you had 2 installations and spoke of the furnace in which there were 12 large ovens and 2 additional with 2 ovens each, making a total of 28 separate burning units. How many human beings could you cremate at one time?
2 to 3 corpses could be burned in one furnace at one time. The furnaces were built large enough for that.
Did you operate at full capacity often?
I would like to emphasize again that I had no responsibility with all the cremation in the stoves. What I was responsible for was the burning of the corpses out in the open. Corporals Nussfield and Foss were responsible for the cremation in the furnaces.
Is that right, Hoss?
First of all, Maul is slightly wrong in regards to the figures he quoted of the furnaces. The 2 large units were made up of 5 double furnaces each, and the other of 4 double furnaces each. Now, it is true that Nussfield and Foss were responsible for the furnace details. Each had a large and a small one, and Maul was responsible for the bodies out in the open. Now, Maul was responsible for the disposition of the ashes, but later on I put Maul in charge of the entire cremation. This was in 1944.
Was that in the 2 months you were back at Auschwitz after you were away?
Yes, that was when I was transferred back to Auschwitz.
How often were the crematoria detail of prisoners exterminated?
As far as I can remember, it was twice before I left for the first time, and they were exterminated again after the action against the Hungarians was completed.
On whose orders were they exterminated?
I received that order from my commandant. And he ordered in particular that the furnace commandos should be shot every 3 months. However, I failed to comply with these orders, as I did not think they were right.
You have said that your detail was never exterminated. What do you say now?
No, that is not true. The work detail with which I worked was never exterminated, as long as I was there and as long as I worked. As regard to the first work detail I had for the excavation of mass graves, which I had to leave because of my attack of typhus, they may have been exterminated when I returned to duty. The only thing I know of is that when I left, the last work detail with which I worked was still alive, and that is every member of the detail was alive when I left. Sometime later, I left. Mutiny broke out in the camp. I know that the entire guard company at the camp was used to suppress this mutiny. I was not there. I was at Gleiwitz at the time. I do not know anything about this, but Holst can tell you that.
Did you ever cremate any of your crematorium detail?
No.
You mentioned that in the killing of the people in the gas chambers that it took only 1/2 minute. On what do you base that?
The gas was poured in through an opening. About 1/2 minute after the gas was poured in, of course, I'm merely estimating the time as we never had a stopwatch to clock it. And we were not interested. At any rate, after 1/2 minute, there was no heavy sounds, no sounds at all that could be heard from the gas chamber.
What kind of sounds were heard before that?
The people wept and screeched.
You observed this and heard all the sounds?
Yes! I had to hear this because I was near there with my work detail. There was nothing I could do against this, as I had no possibility of changing this in any way.
We're not interested in your opinions on that. You helped make the arrangements to put them in the gas chamber and burn them afterwards when they were killed. The only thing you failed to do personally was pour in the gas. Is that it?
I was not responsible for the preparations, as there was no special preparations. The victims were led to the gas chamber by the duty officer, and then there was a work detail from the administrator. They told them to undress. There was further detail from the proper administration, which were responsible to collect all the valuables from the people. The whole thing happened very correctly, and in no instance was there any reason to interfere. I had no right to interfere. Always a doctor supervised the entire thing.
You recall yesterday you said that if any prisoners coming off of new transports were to escape the gas chambers, you would be court-martialed.
I was talking about the detail, not about the transports.
This came at the time you were testifying about your responsibilities at the crematorium.
No, I only say as far as the work detail is concerned, for which I was responsible.
We will not argue about it as the notes show otherwise. What do you say about the detail of Maul?
Maul is not looking at this the right way. Now, it is actually true, and I have explained this before, that the officer was responsible for the entire transport. That he was responsible to see that all were unloaded from each transport. The doctors were responsible for the phase of work to see that the people were killed and all the bodies disposed of. Now, it was the responsibility of the subordinate, like Maul, to see that the people actually got into the gas chambers under the doctors, and then to see that their bodies were burned. As far as the subordinate leader was concerned, it was his responsibility to see that none of the work detail escaped, and he would be responsible to see that none got away. In the last analysis, I was responsible for the entire matter. That is the entire situation dealing with these transports.
You told us about some of the problems of making sure that everyone was exterminated.
Yeah.
For instance, that mothers hid their children under clothing after they undressed. Now, who was the person who gathered up the children, searched them out, and put them in the gas chamber?
I think that this has been slightly misunderstood. The way this thing happened is that the mothers had babies with them. It would be wrapped in blankets or cloth. Now, the people had been told they were going to take a bath. They had no idea they were going to be killed. It was not the idea. The mothers did not want to take the children with them to the bath and left them outside. Now, later on, the work detail from the administration would pick up the babies and put them into the gas chamber as well.
Was it Mole's responsibility to see that the children were disposed of?
Yes. But it would not mean, on the other hand, that Mole would be personally responsible for picking up the babies from under the blankets. I did not tell any one of the officers or non-coms that they would be responsible for this particular thing, but the entire team was responsible for the extermination, okay? It was to be done, and all of them carried out the order smoothly and properly.
You, Mole. You said that your team respected you because you gave them a hand. Was this job of picking up small children and gassing them part of the hand you loaned them?
Possibly this was not expressed correctly by Hoss. I had nothing to do with the searching of the clothes because that was not my duty. As I said, the officers that had charge of the duty when the transport came in was responsible for them until the moment they entered the gas chamber. I had nothing to do with that. I never touched the babies or had anything to do with nothing.
Did any of your men have anything to do with it? Anyone under you?
Yes. The prisoners. They were responsible for that. They had to clean up the room after it had been cleared of people. Then they would take the babies and throw them into the gas chamber. There was a strict order against any SS men touching any of this property.
We're not talking of property, we're talking of people. Did you have a special operation to kill these babies, or were they thrown into a room where people were still alive and all were gassed together?
Such a thing only happened rarely, and I cannot remember a case where a baby was found. But if they were found, they were thrown into the gas chamber.
How do you know?
Well, that was the order for the officer responsible for the transport. And if any children were found, they were to be disposed of like all the rest in the gas chamber.
You carried out your orders?
I emphasize again that if I did not find any children, but if I did, I emphasize again that I did not find any children, but if I did, I would have to throw them in as well.
Did you shoot any babies in the neck like you did the other victims?
Such a thing never happened.
This is what you said about shooting other people this morning when we proved you a liar. Are you sure you were telling the truth this time? End of scene 4. Scene 5. Time 2 days later. Place, a visitor's room in the prison where Host is being detained. The room is empty except for a table and 2 chairs. Ingrid is seated at the table. The door opens and Host enters, escorted by a guard. Host is handcuffed and his legs shackled. He sits down, the guard leaves the room.
Ingrid, how are they treating you?
We're barely getting by.
Are the children well?
They ask me all the time when you'll be coming home. I don't know what to tell them.
Say what you must.
Tell me what I must say!
What do you want from me?
The truth!
The truth.
Yes, the truth!
Truth is you were there with me.
Oh, I know that, but that doesn't mean that I knew what was going on. You made sure of that.
I wanted to protect you. I wanted to protect our children.
Protect us from what? What do we need to be protected from?
Prisoners.
The prisoners? Well, you were the commandant. Oh my God, what was there for you to be afraid of?
Things took place. Unpleasant things that I thought would upset you.
You know, they're accusing you of having committed the most horrible crimes. I can't believe it.
I was just doing my duty.
Doing your duty? Oh, is that all you have to say?
What else can I say?
Rudolph,
I had my orders. I was obliged to carry them out.
But they're saying, Rudolph, that you are responsible for millions of deaths. I mean, how can that be?
I answered their questions. That's all I could do.
But they may execute you.
I know that. What's done is done.
How can you be so calm when you know you'll be leaving behind a widow and children?
Many bad things happened in this war.
Oh, that doesn't help me and the children.
You know, if I could help you, I would.
You and Hitler and your cronies were so sure that Germany would win the war. And we believed you.
I had no reason to doubt my Fuhrer.
Well, what do you think of him now?
Does that matter?
Yes, it matters, because you're being accused of the most awful crimes, and if you thought the Fuhrer was right, well, then how can you possibly explain yourself?
Ingrid, I did not make policy. I carried out orders.
Yes, but you tell them that you were misled or deceived. Well, then maybe they'll let you live.
I'm afraid that's not possible.
Why not? I mean, why can't you say it was all one big misunderstanding, that you were made to follow orders, and otherwise, if you didn't, they would have punished you, or they would have punished us, if you refused to obey.
Because it would not be the truth.
So what are you saying, that you agreed to do all those awful things?
It had nothing to do with whether I agreed or disagreed. It had to do with what I was ordered to do.
They don't believe you. They're holding you responsible. You were the commandant. They know that.
They also know that I had my orders, which I was expected to follow.
My poor deluded husband. I mean, how can you say such a thing when they're telling you that you were the one ordering to commit mass murder?
I did not murder anyone. In fact, during the war, I never so much as even laid a finger on anyone. German, Russian, Jew, you, our children, anyone.
But Rudolph, they're saying that you ordered those
You
things.
just don't understand.
Oh, what is there not to
That
understand?
I was following orders, not giving them.
Listen, Rudolph, even though you tried to shield me from what was going on at the camp, I did see and hear enough things to know that you were in charge of something really big.
I was merely an administrator.
Do you think you're fooling anyone by saying that?
I'm not looking to fool anyone, Ingrid. I did what I was ordered. That's all.
You are being accused of killing women, children, even infants. Entire families wiped out by your orders, under your command, right in front of your eyes.
Yes, that did happen. But they were Jews, and I was told that they were the enemy.
Including little babies. They were the enemies too.
Yes, I was told that and I believed it.
Oh, are you for real?
Yes.
You killed little babies! I mean, what were you thinking? Were you insane? I mean, you could have talked to me.
What good would that have done?
I'm your wife! Doesn't that mean anything to you? Rudolph, I mean, what is going to happen to me and the children?
Have you contacted my sisters?
Well, I tried, but they refuse to speak to me. I mean, they call me a Nazi. Pig, horse, slut, murderous tramp, and other awful names. I mean, I don't know who to turn to.
I don't know what to say. I just know that you're innocent.
I wish I could say the same for you.
The end.